And welcome back to The Wrap. Well, a day after the Pentagon announced plans to send up to 450 additional U.S. troops to Iraq, the military now says it's considering building more bases in that country to help drive back ISIS. We're now joined by Jim Hanson. He's the Executive VP with the Center for Security Policy. Jim has also served in the Army Special Forces. Jim, thanks for joining us from Arlington tonight. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So what would the value be in building more U.S. militaries in Iraq, and how quickly could that be accomplished, and where will these be built? Will these be in, the Sunni provinces where the fighting is most heated right now?
I don't understand why we need to build more bases. What we need to do is get the troops we have off the bases and out on combat missions with the Iraqis. I mean, the Iraqis are poorly led, relatively poorly trained, and they need command and control help, they need fire support coordination, they need people to call in airstrikes, and they need somebody to make sure they don't just run off the battlefield and leave several thousand Humvees for our enemies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim. I was about to ask, is it also about motivation for Iraqi troops as well? I mean, they're going against people that will die for their cause, and the Iraqi troops are basically working for, we were talking about minimum wage before, for a paycheck. And if things get bad, maybe they're like, well, I'm not beholden necessarily to the central Iraqi government. I don't even know who I'm fighting for. It's just a paycheck. Is that playing a role here as well?
It absolutely is. And in addition to that, most of the troops in the Iraqi army are Shia. So ISIS is in the Sunni areas. And the motivation of these Shia troops to go and die to free Sunni areas is pretty low. So I think those two things combined make them very poorly motivated. And it's hard to get them to fight. And obviously they aren't fighting well. So they need a lot more help than 450 more advisors who are going to have to stay on the bases.
Okay, I'm going to promote you right here on national television. You're now President of the United States. How many U.S. troops would you send in there?
I'm not sure, tens of thousands at least, and I would send them potentially to work with the Sunnis. I would send some to work with the Kurds. I would arm both the Kurds and the Sunnis independent of the Iraqi government, because the Iraqi government has been keeping them unsupplied on purpose because they don't want anybody up against them. And then I would let our troops lead and operate with both of those organizations and potentially the Iraqi army too. And if that happens and we cut the airstrikes loose, let the special operators loose, we got a chance to take ISIS down.
Okay. Jim, let me just go to Carl real quick because he's one with military experience and has been in that region. So you were giving a thumbs up to several things that Jim was saying.
I did. Tens of thousands of troops, it's absolutely required. I would arm nobody except for ourselves. I would go in there. We trained these guys for 10 years to no avail. They did not learn. They did not want to learn. They don't care. They're not accountable enough and they're not intelligent enough to effectively execute this mission. We need to commit our own resources and do this on our terms, which unfortunately will lead to a lot of Iraqi collateral damage.
I have a feeling that we're going to get an opposite answer.
Carl is absolutely half right. I mean, I'm ready to give up. I mean, don't want to save any countries that don't want to be saved. And every evidence is that these are people who do not want to save a unified Iraq.
Wouldn't that affect our national security?
It might, and there are things we got to do in order to avoid that. I think encouraging turn it into 3 states. Maybe Joe Biden was right a few years ago when he was talking about that.
Sunni, Shia.
But I will say this: no more American deaths defending that place. We've already given it the office with our blood, our treasure, and I say no more.
Amy?
I would actually just ask Jim this question. I agree kind of with both of my colleagues here at the table that ISIS is, of course, a national security threat to the United States, and an Iraq that's falling apart obviously has created a vacuum that allows ISIS to gain territory and resources. Is there a strategy where U.S. troops defeat ISIS definitively, leave Iraq to Iraqis, and we don't have to revisit this problem 10 years from now?
You know, I think there is. And in what might be the biggest shock tonight, I'm going to agree with Ellis. Let's partition Iraq. Let's let Baghdad and Iran work together for their Shia state. The Kurds essentially have their own state. And let's let the Sunni have their own state. The tribal leaders there will have the potential and the will to go ahead and take out ISIS. And then we don't have 3 groups that don't get along trapped in a state that was only drawn up for post-colonial reasons.
That's interesting, Jim. Let me just ask you about this report out today in The Guardian that says Al-Qaeda is losing money and manpower to ISIS to the point where they may be going bankrupt. Is ISIS now the new big terror group, and because their propaganda machine is so, I don't want to use impressive, but it is powerful, is that why ISIS is winning this war against Al-Qaeda as far as being the #1 recruiter of jihadists around the world?
Well, that's part of it. The other thing is ISIS has been tremendously successful, and they took territory. They planted the black flag, they declared a caliphate, and now Boko Haram has declared loyalty, a couple groups in Libya, groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. They're an intercontinental caliphate. That's pretty important, and unfortunately for us, that's a sad thing because it makes us look weak. They look like the strong horse.
Okay, Jim. Well, thanks so much for joining us from Washington. We appreciate it, sir.
Pleasure to be with
Okay.
you.
Fortunately, guys, we got to go, but I'm sure we'll discuss this at another time. Interesting topic indeed, and I did not see that agreeing with you thing coming.
Nice, right?
Yeah.
Those coalitions.
Al, coming up next, the drama grows as the House gets ready to vote on the president's trade agenda. He's on the side of the Republicans against Democrats. Everything's upside down. Stay tuned.